Good afternoon, everyone. It's Debbie Lorenzo, coordinator from the Office of Special Ed Procedural Support. And we're going to be joined by Ellie Stack, coordinator from the Office of Special Ed Instruction, and teams and members of both our teams and from other offices as we present information for the afternoon session. It's a smaller group than this morning session, but you'll have us all to your, we'll be divided attention. If you need anything, just raise your hand. We're going to ask questions during the different sessions. You can ask questions, and then we'll have time at the end. So I'm going to turn this over to Michelle Waller, who is going to be presenting on transition with her team.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're now moving into the time of year where we all need to start thinking about and planning the transition of our students from one school to the next. It is easy to forget some crucial steps and components of this process. So today we will be facilitating some group discussion to share and generate ideas. I want to draw your attention to the transition procedures and timelines document that was provided to you by your PSL from Central Office Leadership. They are also available by clicking on the links on this slide, or you can find them in the handout packet. Okay. In just a moment, we're going to randomly split you all up into breakout groups. Within your groups, please use the link in the chat window to access the discussion guide questions. You will have until 12:50 to discuss the questions. Be prepared to share any ideas or aha moments that you had with your group or something you would like to do differently as you plan for transitions this year. Are there any questions before we move into breakout groups? Okay, let the breakout groups begin.
Okay, Ashley, I think I got everyone. I'll start popping into some of the breakout groups.
Whoa. Mary got cut off.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm going to give a few minutes for everybody to get back into the main room. Okay, so who would like to share some things that they heard in their group? You can either raise your hand or you can put it in the chat. Kristen, Burma.
Hi, everyone. One thing that my school is doing is we are going to create a series of short videos about all aspects of the school day, everything from what to do when you arrive with video footage, introductions, what to do at lunchtime, and things like that for both the students to see and their families.
Oh, that sounds exciting. I like that. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else have anything that they want to share with us? If you speak, you can type in the chat. I'll say it for you. Linda Shannon.
Sure. Our group talked about how to kind of replicate tours and such in level of service discussions and maybe even just a little bit beyond virtual and how we could use those in the future to, if we did videos or flip grids. Miss Reed shared a really great idea about flip grids to introduce the different roles that exist in the different levels of service, and how cool that would be if we could use that in the future, so that instead of tours, when there's always been, for me, having worked at Public Day and CSS, a concern when we have kids and families tour and kind of what that does to the kids in the current program. So it's kind of neat to think about how we could take away some of these experiences and how we approach it in the virtual setting and what we could use that for in the future. So I was really appreciative of her participation in our group and sharing those ideas. Ellen Reed.
All right, thank you. That sounds exciting. I like to hear. We've done these meetings quite a few times over the last, today and with the elementary group. So we've heard a lot of good ideas, and so I know that you all have a lot of ways to be innovative during this time. So that's what we want to hear, and that's what we want to share, so that others, can learn from that. Is there anything else that anyone would like to share with us? Afternoons are always so quiet. Okay, so it looks like, one of the things I guess I would remind you is that, to share and talk over your ideas with your PSLs, make sure that they're included, because as we look at the transitions, we are looking at things that are happening not only in your pyramid, but sometimes across pyramids. And so it's helpful to share ideas and include your PSL in what you're doing so that they can speak to those things. Sometimes when we're in groups as PSLs, but as they speak with families, we know that, the transition to middle school sometimes is really tough on parents. The transition to high school is not usually as tough. Parents are more accepting of it, but being that we're in a virtual world now and not knowing exactly what the fall will hold, it's good that we all stay connected and know what things that we can support and offer, and using that to work together to support our families and our kids. Anyone else want to share or have any questions about transition at this time? Okay, if not, I want to thank you for sharing, and I want to introduce Alice Lima Whitney. She is our secondary resource teacher with the Instructional Services Department, and she is here today to provide a brief introduction to the P-List.
Thank you, Michelle. Can everybody hear me okay? I always check when I turn on my mic for the first time in a group. Great. I'm getting one yes. So I am here to talk to you about the P-list. Some of you may be familiar with this tool already. Those of you that are not, this is a reminder of the purpose of the P-list, what it was created to do. And as you read over these statements, I want you to think about how this tool might support your teams during transition. Just give you a second to read those. If you feel like sharing, go ahead and put it in the chat so others can see maybe something you're already doing or something you're thinking about as you read these. Okay, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So today I'm going to cover quite a bit. So I wanted to remind you that all of the resources to access the guide, as well as links to information about how to use it, frequently asked questions, and then course information is all on this placement page, which is linked actually here in the slide deck as well as in your session guide for the day. So as a reminder, or for some of you that don't know, the P-list is a tool that automatically sorts students who scored below 420 on their last reading and or writing SOL, and then provides data aggregated in a spreadsheet so that to facilitate conversations about that student. So I am actually already in the tool, but I want to show you, if you could move to the next slide, thanks. Here's briefly how to access the tool from the intranet page. You would go to the account sign-on, EDSL, and then log in using your credentials. Again, remember all of this is in the guides. Then you might search for responsive or MTSS in the search catalog, and then I suggest that you add it to your favorites. And then your next step, depending on where you are in the process, is to select Insight or Foresight. Today I'm going to show you Insight first, and then we are going to look at Foresight, and I'll explain the difference. Next slide. Oh, nope, I jumped ahead. Go back one slide, and I'm going to share my screen. Sorry about that, everybody. So while I'm getting my screen ready to share, the difference between Insight and Foresight is that Insight is where you see students currently in your building, and Foresight is where you see students that are expected to be built in your building next year. So here we are. I'm already in the inside the tool. I want to point out that Insight has this blue banner at the top. That's how you might know that you're in it, and everything in my materials is color-coded accordingly. So we're looking at a middle school right now, and typically when you open this, you are going to see student ID information. I've removed that for privacy during this meeting. The first thing that we would do is come over to the left and select the focus for your view, and that would be the P-list or literacy. And again, it will automatically sort to the students that scored below 420 on their reading and or writing SOL, and then aggregates the data that we know schools need to make the decision about that student's placement for next year. So you'll see core SOL scores, a couple years of reading SOLs, their Lexile, and I have actually added screener percentile. Typically for secondary, only the Lexile shows, and I'm actually going to show you right now how to add a column. Normally, you do not see that the student's special ed status was not added automatically for privacy reasons also. So in this columns box, you would type spec and then select spec ed. Notice now that this is highlighted, it's going to add a column to the spreadsheet on the right. So anything you do on the left impacts what you see on the right. So as I mentioned, I had already added the screener data because I did want to show you the drill down for that data. So anytime that you can see a hand like this, that is because you can actually click on it and see additional information for that student. So in this case, we can see this student's history of screener data, and then you can actually click on their overall score and get it by domain level. So this particular student's max score means they took that part of the assessment and scored out of that specific segment. If it said tested out, that meant that they actually didn't access that part of the test. New in the last 2 years is that every student in elementary school is tested in every single domain, regardless of grade level. So most middle school students will have it. And for our high school folks, your rising ninth graders should have some domain level scores in there as well. The other place that I really want to point out for drill down is the WIDA access. I'm going to choose this student that's going to have some history in here so that you can see, you can look at that history as well. This is particularly useful if the student is dually identified and you need to coordinate with ESOL and special education to determine next steps for that student. And again, it's blue and I can make it into a hand, so I can click and I can see their domain, language domain level scores. So that's another handy trick. The other thing that I would like to show you that for for middle school and high school is helpful is that you can also look at a student's current course enrollment, and there actually is a column you can add for previous. Just sometimes it's helpful to look at where they are this year to know what you might be thinking about for the coming year. Now I'm going to switch over to a tool that is not live data so that I can show you a couple additional things. So here I'm looking in Insight. So I am current students and I've entered information about this particular student and made a recommendation. And these literacy notes are where you might click to add information about diagnostic data that's not in here already, and where you might make that recommendation. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. I just want to show you the functionality right now between Insight and Foresight. So notice here the student has a note and has been recommended for a class. When I switch over to Foresight for the high school that is going to receive this student, now it's not updating automatically because this isn't the real thing, but that recommendation is actually in there. And then here it's captured that I've written a note about that student. And then what I want to point out is that the process that you'll see recommended in the timeline and in the user and access guide is that after reviewing the student's current school recommendation, the receiving school in Foresight can use this literacy recommend enroll column to either confirm or change that recommendation. And typically that might not happen until May or June, but that's the intention of this particular column. The other thing I want to point out while we're in the actual tool is that over here on the left, I can see where the students are coming to me from, and I can sort by that school. So if I have questions about a specific school and I'm talking to the person at that middle school, each of us can sort and look at just the kids we want to talk about. The last thing I want to show you before I show you how to make notes is that over here on the left, if there are recommendations, you can then sort by recommendation, which will give you a really good idea of how many kids have been recommended both by their current school or by you or the receiving school. And you can sort by that and just look at the number for how many kids were actually recommended for a particular class. And I think I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the slide deck so I can show you how to make those notes. So can one of the other moderators show the slide deck, since I'll have to be exiting afterwards?
Chris is bringing it up.
Okay, great. And as we're waiting for that to happen, just again, thinking about how might you use this tool to support the transition process for rising middle schoolers and rising ninth graders. Middle school is really sandwiched where they have to share and they have to get information and share information. So it's a little bit more involved for them, and using the sorting features, you can make it a smidge easier. So to add the literacy notes, you'll see that when you click on the number actually, can you go, oh, no, that's the right one. So when you click on the number in the tool, this box will pop up at the top that says literacy notes. You would hit the plus sign, and then the box below shows up for you to look at. If you click on the program intervention box, it will actually give you a pop-up menu of things that you might be doing with that student. And then if you go to the next slide, please. So you can then write a progress note for that student using that program. So for example, what level is the student in the program? What have they accomplished so far, and what might you expect them to do by the end of the year? The other information that you might put here, as I mentioned before, is the diagnostic data that is not already collected in EDSL. And there are notes for how you might make those progress notes on the guiding documents for each level. Can we skip to the next slide, please? So the second column, you would make recommendations as the current school sending the kid to another school, or kids in your building, to keep track of who you're recommending for what. And it operates pretty much the same way. There's a drop-down menu for you to select what course is being recommended for that student. And then next slide. Oh, nope, I skipped it. Go back to that other one. Sorry. And then you might make a note to support that recommendation. So that the student might need continued support with decoding, for example, and in this case, they're middle school, so they would go into literacy 7 or 8, depending on their grade level. Next slide. And inside of Foresight, it works exactly the same. You're looking at the students that are coming to your school, and you would click on the literacy recommend number. And if you could go to the next slide. And here is the difference between looking at Insight and looking at Foresight. So just again, they're color coded and everything that's provided to support, just recall really, that in the blue Insight worksheet, you're working on current students, and in the purple Foresight sheet, you're looking at future students. And next slide. So we went through this really, really quickly, and I want to remind you that all of the resources for you to look at this information, how to access it, suggestions for what to enter are all linked here. And then lastly, I want to mention that anything that is added to the worksheets is accessible via FOIA or FERPA. So make sure that everything that you're putting into the sheets is specific to literacy progress or needs. And then lastly, I often work with teams. I work with vertical articulation groups from middle and high, from elementary, middle, and high, all kinds of configurations of groups, small school teams to work in the P-list and show people how to use it and provide more information about the classes. So this is my plug if you need to get in touch with me and want that support. This slide includes a link to email me. I was doing a lot of talking, so if anyone wants to have, I think I have a couple more minutes if anybody has a question for the good of the group.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions at this time. So Alice, we'd like to thank you for presenting information on the P-list. You've already mentioned that anything that's typed in here can be requested by the parent through FERPA or FOIA. So remind your school teams, please, that of that information. In your meeting guide packet, there are additional resources you can use with your transitioning students and their parents, and Alice has made herself available to everyone. So we thank you for your time today.
Thank you all very much, and you know where to find me. I'm the only Lima Whitney in Fairfax County. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Alice. So we're going to move on to Career and Transition Services, but before we move on, this session is being recorded, so we will place it in the Special Education Hub, so you'll be able to look through it and go through the different parts if you want to just review one of the sections. So I have Sarah Blake, who's going to present on CTS next.
All right, thank you, Debbie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, thanks. As Debbie said, I'm Sarah Blake. I'm the Educational Specialist for Career and Transition Services. And I'm going to have you go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. Community work experience. At this point, our CWEs are still on hold, but we've been addressing community work experience by looking at next steps, possible timelines, and considerations for us resuming going into the community. However, it's not something that we can be done overnight, especially considering the current COVID conditions and the number of students that participate in CWE yearly. So the considerations that are impacting CWE right now include staff coverage in light of ADA and leave being taken. Also, what do the student numbers look like? How receptive are employers to having our students attend their work site? Transportation shuttles are another major consideration as the window for transporting students may be reduced. And then all logistics aside, another major concern is around equity and how do we prioritize who can attend and who can't based on employer availability. So last year we had over 1,200 students participate in CWE. And if we include the 18 to 22-year-old programs such as STEP, Pulley and Davis, WAT, EFEO, EFE, and Career Prep, all of these things are guiding our decisions. So with that said, we have two initiatives that we are doing right now that relate to CWE. Our work-based learning teacher, Sue Eaton, and our assistive technology resource teacher for our transition programs, Judy Lieberman, are leading weekly synchronous lessons during 4th and 5th period for our students who are enrolled in WAT. And for each of these weekly sessions, they will provide pre-learning activities for teachers to use with students relating to the upcoming live sessions with exit tickets for reflection. And at the end of the 45-minute live session, the students will be able to complete the exit ticket. And the first session is to be held this week, today, and again on Friday. And WAT teachers have been sent information on how to join these sessions, along with guidance on having their students participate. And these lessons and activities each week will focus on virtual work-based learning resources from our Career and Transition Services Hub. And there might be virtual workplace tours, recordings from informational interviews, and other classroom resources. So we hope that the WAT teachers at your school find this useful and the students enjoy it, the supplement to the curriculum in absence of our work sites. Another initiative that we're doing in lieu of CWE is to begin offering work-focused situational assessments in the community. And this would be individual assessments for students. So we're working on finding some employers through our ETRs and conducting our trained hourly job coaches and our career assessment staff, the evaluators from Marshall and Woodson, to help us out with these situational assessments. And priority for students to receive the situational assessments would be for our students who have not participated in any job site experience to date. They may be enrolled in WAT or EFEO this year because they wanted to gain work experience in hopes of attending STEP or Davis or Pulley. So these assessments would provide a strong data point for IEP teams to use in help of placement decisions in the absence of actual worksite experience. So these situational assessments are not meant to determine placement, but they're meant to help with the decision process and to increase like the students' awareness in the job site experience. So those are the two things we're offering in lieu of community work experience right now. And another thing I wanted to address was Super Transition Week. This is a big event for our families that we have coming up during the week of February 22nd to February 25th, and we encourage parents and staff to join us, and our community support providers will be there to help us work through the workshops. We're going to hold this event virtually this year, and it's allowing us to have a widened content offering. So our sessions are going to include middle school transition supports, CTS programming, sessions on self-determination. We're going to do one session on I Am Determined, K through 12, and we're going to do another self-determination session on supported decision-making that is going to be presented by the advocate from the ARC of Northern Virginia. And we will also have post-secondary education rep to discuss how to match colleges or post-secondary programs to the right support and services. And we'll have 2 parent panels at Super Transition Week. One is going to be focused on students transitioning from school to post-secondary education or competitive employment. And then the other panel on the following night is going to focus on parents discussing the transition of their child from school to adult services and supported employment and other day programs. So please encourage your staff and families and students to attend Super Transition Week, and staff can earn certification points through MyPDE, and anyone can attend all or any of these sessions. So we hope to see you there. Other things that we're working on is mentoring events. Sue Eaton, our work-based learning resource teacher, again, is planning 3 virtual mentoring events for students this winter and spring. One is in collaboration with Booz Allen Hamilton, a business consulting firm that we partner with for decades. And another is our employer partner, CVS. And then the last mentoring event that we're doing is with the MITRE Corporation for students on the autism spectrum that may be interested in cybersecurity careers. And there's a link with the description of each of these mentoring events in the meeting guide. And ETRs at your schools are currently recruiting participants to work with families on getting them there. The next bullet is the summary of performance. ETRs are working virtually to complete the SOPs with all the seniors in your building that have IEPs. The most important part of this process is the summary that they complete in the fall. This is especially important since seniors have been virtual for almost a year, and it's a way for us to address their transition needs before they graduate or get close to exiting the public school system. So keep in mind that ETRs are required by VDOE to connect with seniors one-on-one to complete these surveys, and we want to increase awareness just among the school staff and you all the importance of the SOPs and that they're working to get these completed. The last bullet on this slide is middle school transition support. Just a reminder that Maggie Contreras is our central office resource teacher for middle school transition support. She can provide training to your staff on all aspects of transition or a selected topic. Ms. Contreras can answer questions you may have regarding advice and best practices, and combine some ongoing efforts for some parent engagement, as we do expect more parents to be asking questions as we've been doing more presentations in the community on transition, and it's our goal to build capacity in the middle school staff to understand and deliver transition services in at grade 8 or age 14. And please know that any questions or requests for trainings in the middle school can be directed to also the ETRs at your feeder high school, and that a link to the CTS staff contact list is also in your meeting guide. So Maggie Contreras can help with the middle schools and the ETRs at your feeder schools. All right, Debbie, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Adult service input in the IEP. As we're required to document adult service involvement for our students on the IEP for indicator 13, I just want to take a couple moments to address the process for this. Students who have an open and active case with an adult service provider, such as DARS, the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, these students are assigned a transition counselor, and Indicator 13 also requires that this representative be invited to the annual IEP meeting. And our ETRs, they work very closely with these DARS counselors. Each DARS counselor is assigned to each high school. And the steps here are linked in your meeting guide on how these this process happens. So any adult service provider can be invited to the IEP when it makes sense to do so with parent permission or if the parent requests it. And the ETR can also recommend the adult service provider to attend if they think it would help. And then any student who has an open or active case with an adult service agency such as DARS should have a representative there. So case managers should obtain a parent permission, including the IEP 202 and document on the IEP 201. And then there's also the SSSE 79A form, which will need to be signed by the parent prior to the beginning of the meeting. And if the DARS counselor is unable to attend the IEP meeting, the ETR will obtain a written update from the DARS counselor regarding the current plan or transition activities to present to the team. And so the intake meeting that our students have with adult service providers are not considered part of the IEP. These meetings are usually run at the adult agencies and with the student caregiver. If an intake meeting is held at the school or virtual, the ETR is usually there. And once an intake meeting is held, updated status of the student's involvement can be documented by the case manager as an addendum, or the ETR can just document and summarize the meeting and provide updates at the annual IEP in the PLOP that the intake meeting was held and the status. Again, this process is all in writing in your meeting guide under the CTS updates. So. All right, any questions on the two slides that we have for Career and Transition Services?
Well, thank you, Sarah, for coming today and presenting that information. And again, this will be recorded, so any information you'll be able to go back and listen to. So we're going to move now. Thank you, Sarah. So we're going to move now. Oh, you're welcome. We're going to move now to SOL and VAP information, and Ellen's going to go first with VAP.
Yes. Welcome, everybody. I'm Ellen Augusta, Program Manager for ESY and Assessment. The first update that I want to share is Testing Memo 026-21, hot off the press yesterday, addresses the local alternative assessments in lieu of the SOL test in grades 3 through 8, specifically grade 4 Virginia Studies, grade 8 Civics and Writing. So please take a look at that. It gives you guidance on the local alternative assessment in lieu of the SOL. Now, I just spoke with the state this morning, and they have not yet said that this applies to VAP. So in the meantime, teachers need to continue to instruct and collect evidence for those students participating in the VAP. As far as our BDOE audit updates, we have been going through yearly VAP audits since 2017. There is a link provided in the meeting guide to the VDOE guidance document, which outlines what school teams should be considering when determining if a student meets the criteria for participation in VAP. During these audits, the state is looking at data included in question 2 on the VAP criteria form to ensure students truly meet the criteria of a significant cognitive disability. Documentation must include learner characteristics and academic achievement, adaptive behavior, and psychological scores. If scores are not consistently below 55 across all areas, the student does not likely meet the criteria of a student with a significant cognitive disability. Secondly, they're looking at the justification statement, which needs to include all components of how the student meets the criteria, the impact of participation in the VAP assessment, and the impact on the diploma option. If the criteria form does not include this information in these two areas, the state is sending these IEPs back to us. Stating that a student is following a modified curriculum, is significantly below grade level, or has interfering behaviors is not enough to answer these questions and provide justification of a student with a significant cognitive disability. Next slide. Highlight testing memo 014-21, which addresses the parent refusals to the state assessments, both SOL and VAP. This year there is a COVID-19 refusal. If parents refuse based upon COVID, the student or the school will not be impacted by that refusal. And then, of course, there is still the other parent refusal, which in that case, the student receives a 0 for the assessment, and the school also does. All of the information and the links are in the meeting agenda. We'll give you more information about the parent refusal process and what forms need to be completed. Next slide. I did want to take a few minutes to highlight the trainings that the ESY and assessment team have been putting together to support VAP this year. Of course, it will be a virtual collection of evidence. Training Module 1 really addresses the criteria and whether the student truly meets the criteria for VAP. Module 2 looks at understanding and selecting those aligned standards of learning. Next slide. Module 3 really takes a closer look at utilizing evidence-based programs to meet the instruction in the aligned standards of learning. And Module 4 looks at strategies for unpacking those aligned standards of learning. Next slide. Then in Module 5, we look at instructional strategies to support VAP. And then finally, hopefully released this week, will be Module 6, where we are walking school teams through the use of the digital VAP folders, collecting that evidence digitally, and we also have created a guide to help support that. Next slide, which is highlighted on the next slide. This walks teams through considerations for digital collection of evidence, and it has tips, examples, and tools that can be used for the digital collection of evidence. Next slide. All of these trainings are housed on our VAP Google site. You can get access to this by reaching out to or just clicking on the link in your meeting guide, and we will give you access to it. But all of the modules are housed here along with other resources, as well as still on our internet site. Next slide. The team has also put together a teacher-created resources Google Drive. On this drive, teachers are housing instructional materials and assessments for instructing and assessing the aligned standards of learning. Again, this is teacher-created assessments, so individual teachers still need to look at the information and ensure that it's meeting all of the requirements of a standard. But it's a great resource for teachers. Again, by reaching out or clicking on the link, we can give you access, or you can reach out to either of our ESY assessment specialists, Michelle Henry or Amber Terry. Next slide. We have been housing VAP Q&A sessions. We had our first one yesterday and was very productive. We have 3 additional ones scheduled where school teams can come in, ask questions, listen to the questions that are being asked, and get support in regards to that. Next slide. Other important information is our VAP collection turn-in will be April 14th. Of course, again, this is all digitally. So that's the drop-dead date for having your assessments completed. And we're in the process of planning the scoring event, but just to let you know, it could possibly be a virtual event.
Ellie had her hand up.
Yes, Ellie.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Debbie. That was actually a mistake.
Oh, okay. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about information pertaining to earning credit for diploma, and I think I have the first slide in this presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Ellie. Oh, nope, I'm going to let Ellie talk. I think she moved the slides around on me again. Go ahead, Ellie.
I did. I have to keep you on your toes. We've actually added this slide after the morning session. There was interest from people this morning in us having a diploma options for students with disabilities office hours. And so we have set up these 3 dates, and they're also on your meeting guide. We're going to be going into this information now, but with our limited time with you all today, and knowing there might be a variety of questions that we don't have time for today, we set these up so that you all could come and we can help you with your questions. And of course, if we need any beyond March 3rd, we can also create them at that time.
Okay, now it's me again. I just wanted to highlight Test Memo 2021. This is in regards to end of course expedited retakes. There has been a slight change in students that are pre-approved for that second attempt. They're outlined on this slide. The major difference is the score has now been lowered to 350, where before students had to have a 375 to 399. Now, if they have below 350 for our term graduates, they will automatically be loaded for an expedited retake. And then any first attempts of scores 350 to 399 with remediation, those students will automatically be loaded. And then of course, for credit accommodations, we need to ensure that students with disabilities can leverage that retake of 350 to 374 by having the expanded retake credit accommodation documented in C-STARS. This testing memo does go into further detail about other expedited retakes that require special permission. So I would encourage you to visit and take a look at this test memo. Ellie, it's
All right, thank you, Ellen. And so just like Ellen just spoke to us about the expedited retake and how there are some differences with that for this school year, we are very honored to have Beatrice Huffman join us. Beatrice is the director for let's see, I just pulled up her office over here and then I scrolled, the Office of Assessment and Reporting, and formerly the Office of Student Testing. And Beatrice is going to talk to us a little bit about the emergency locally awarded verified credit. You all are very familiar with the traditional locally awarded verified credit and who that applies to and how students can earn that. And so she's going to talk to us about some that are available for students currently. Beatrice?
Hi everyone, glad to be with you today and share with you a little bit about these new opportunities that the State Board of Education rolled out beginning last spring. So all of these emergency locally awarded verified credits are an outcome of the coronavirus pandemic. And I should say, because Ellie caught me this morning, some of the information that I'm sharing with you here is hot off the press as of early today. So the details that you have access to through this slide and that linked resource from this slide are a level of detail that your administrators, your DSS, your assessment coaches have not yet received. So that will be coming out to them hopefully later this week. But do be aware that you're getting some information, kind of a preview of some information. And I am keeping today's information pretty high level, partly because of that, but also because it is a team effort. Still though, when you're thinking about the ways in which you're supporting students with disabilities to receive verified credit for education, for graduation, these opportunities are certainly something to be aware of. So for our students who were enrolled with us last spring and over the summer when we had school closures, there were opportunities for those enrolled courses and up to one prior course that the State Board of Education offered for emergency verified credit. A difference between the emergency locally awarded verified credit and traditional locally awarded verified credit is these do not count toward the cap that would normally apply for some students. And additionally, they can apply for advanced studies and standard diplomas regardless of when the student entered 9th grade. The last group, this newest group, was only announced a couple of weeks ago. And this is the newest information that your DSS, your assessment coach, do not yet have the details on. So those that are noted in blue. And these are 3 types. For students who are taking a history, social science SOL course this year, we will be using a performance assessment option in place of the SOL for those students. And then for other students enrolled in SOL courses, they will have the opportunity to earn a locally awarded verified credit with only one SOL attempt of 350 or above. These students also have an opportunity to earn additional prior course emergency locally awarded verified credit. So again, the linked document gives a few more details about how those students are found eligible, whether those are processed at the school level or centrally, and some of the other information that you may want. And we will be putting out more details through infograms, actiongrams, and information sessions in the coming weeks.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. That was awesome. And like Beatrice said earlier, we did point out that you all are getting it hot off the press. It was funny as we were talking with Beatrice to prepare for today's meeting, it was just like, oh, and here's something new and this is coming. And in fact, she was clarifying some final information this morning. So you all are literally getting it right off the, oh my gosh, I lost the saying, but you're getting it first is the point. And so we appreciate that, Beatrice. What we didn't want to have to happen is Beatrice come today and then the information be brand new, different tomorrow. And so as far as we know, this is the information. But those are our options that she talked about that are available to all students. Now, as she was talking, she also referenced some that could apply also for the Advanced Studies Diploma. What we're going to do now is take time to talk a little bit about credit accommodations and more about one particular credit accommodation. You can probably guess which one we're going to talk more about if you've been coming to these meetings for a few years. But we just wanted, it's that time of the year for us to make sure that this is on everybody's radar. And also, just like the information that Ellen shared regarding the VAP, that we want to make sure your Cat B teachers get, and all of the information we've gotten otherwise that goes to all your teachers, please make sure this information does get shared with your teachers and staff who are working with students who are going for one of the diplomas. We want to make sure they're aware of what options are available. So credit accommodations have been available to students with disabilities for a number of years. And the conversations that school teams have regarding whether or not a student requires an credit accommodation revolve around the questions that are on the screen. These are the criteria questions that you can find in the IEP. school team considers these, on the next slide, we can see the different credit accommodations that are available to our students with disabilities. The very first one does point out, though, that, or give you the option of selecting that credit accommodations will be identified at a later date. And so this does allow for school teams to consider the credit accommodations criteria at a meeting, but then as they're looking at the options, maybe it's not time to select one, or before they select one, they want to try something else first. And so the school teams have some flexibility with that in postponing when they decide actually which credit accommodations they're going to be using. The very last credit accommodation is the one that we're going to spend the rest of our time today focusing on, and that's the special permission credit accommodation for locally awarded verified credit. As we go to the next slide, the acronym that we use for this is the SPLAVC-A. That's the Special Permission Locally Awarded Verified Credit Accommodation. And if you all were here last year, Andrew Guillen would have been presenting with me, and he would call it the SPLAVCA. And that is the accommodation, the most recent credit accommodation for our students with disabilities, that allows for students with disabilities to be considered for the locally awarded verified credit when they've scored even below the number that is required for the other locally awarded verified credits. One of the things that we want to make sure that you have is that this is on your radar, and it's also on the radar of your other colleagues, so that we're sure that IEP teams are continuing to consider this as appropriate for students. The picture that's on the screen right now, that is a screenshot of the intranet page that has these resources on it, and the link is available to you on the meeting guide, the session guide, or if you click the green letters in the upper left-hand corner, that will also take you to the web page that has the information on it, including the video, the training video, all about the SPLAVCA, and it goes into great detail. But this is also additionally why we're offering those office hours, because there's so many options. Can students get credit? There are lots of options. So if we go to the next slide, though, when we talk about the SPLAVC-A, there are additional criteria to what is available or what's required for credit accommodations. So in order for a student to be found appropriate for the SPLAVC-A, we do the credit accommodations criteria, and then we do these additional criteria. The first one is a question that we're going to be spending more time on this morning or this afternoon, talking about the student has passed or is passing a subject course based on the non-modified curriculum. The next one is that they have taken the SOL and they scored below the 375. And if, the reason why 375 is selected is because if they score between 375 and 400, we can consider them for a typical locally awarded verified credit. The next one is talking about how a student's disability is what has impacted them so they could not show or demonstrate their knowledge on the SOL test. So it's not for a different reason, but it's due to their disability that they weren't able to demonstrate their knowledge. And then lastly, making sure we have considered and implemented all appropriate additional accommodations, whether they are the credit accommodations or just typical testing accommodations. So those are the criteria questions. The ones that we get asked the most about is on the next slide. What do we mean by a student participating and passing a non-modified curriculum class? And this is the one point that when this first came out, we did in Fairfax have to change our thinking a little bit. And I know that for some of you who have been around with us for a while, you've heard a similar presentation the last couple of years, and I appreciate you sticking with us. And for some of you who are new to your role, I appreciate you being here and being a part of this. But please, no matter where your comfort is with this, we also want you to make sure your teams are also comfortable by what we mean by a non-modified curriculum. Years ago, whenever a teacher would make changes to what they were teaching or how the students showed their knowledge, we would call that modified. And that's how we typically used it in Fairfax. When the state came out with this criteria question, we realized we had to tighten up what we meant by modified or non-modified. And so what the state means now is when we're saying the curriculum is non-modified, we mean that it's not we're not adapting it, non-adapted. So on the left-hand side of this chart, you can see that a non-modified or an accommodated assignment or instruction means that it meets the grade level standard. So we may be making changes, we may be making it more accessible for our students, but at the end of the day, it meets the grade level standard. The modified or adapted assignment means that it does not meet the grade level standard. And that's the big question with criteria question number 1. Is, are we instructing the student and is the student showing knowledge that demonstrates the grade level standard, or have we made changes to it so that the student is not showing grade level content standard because of the changes we have made? So we have a few slides that we're going to work on together. This is an interactive portion of this presentation. And so I'm going to read to you the scenario, and then we're going to ask which example, 1 or 2, which one is modified. So this first one, the students have been provided the world history text, and students will read the chapter on ancient Greece and complete the graphic organizer describing the social and religious structure of ancient Greece. So that's the curriculum expectation that for all students. Looking at what's in number 1 and number 2, which one of those examples would we say is modified, does not meet the grade level standard? So after you read it, go ahead and put in the chat window a 1 or a 2. What do you think? Okay, I appear to be frozen. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, Ellie, we can hear you.
This happened last week.
I know. At almost the same time.
At almost the exact same time. So I don't know if you all are answering or not. I didn't hear what sounded like chats coming in.
There's one person has put a 2. They're being a little shy.
Okay.
No, there comes more 2s. There comes another 2.
Okay. Well, when I was frozen, when I wasn't frozen, I could see who was in the room. And I know this isn't a shy group, but I can respect that. Okay, yeah. So the number 2 is the one that is the example of an assignment that has been modified. A student doing number 2. So both of them, the student is reading a reduced language text, but in that second one, the student isn't being asked to show that same level of knowledge, the same grade level expectation. So you're right, it's number 2. All right, moving to the next slide. And my whole computer is frozen, so I can't even go to the next slide on my on my other screen. So I'm wondering, Debbie, can you read what
we've gone
expectation?
So we've gone to the next slide, Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm having a coughing fit. You're frozen and I'm coughing.
Do you want me to read it?
I can hop in.
I can read it.
Thank you.
The next one says, when given 10 problems, students will determine the slope of a line when given an equation of the line, the graph of the line, or 2 points on the line. And this is based on an algebra standard for 6A. Now, you're welcome. Go ahead, Ellie. Jump back in.
No, I appreciate you reading it. I'm sitting here listening to you. So thank you. So that's the curriculum expectation. Now looking at the assignment, assuming your screen isn't frozen, look at the 2 assignments, column 1 and column 2. Which one of those And if I remember correctly, this is an example where the student's been asked to do fewer problems on homework. That's the support that we're giving the student. Which one, column 1 or 2, was modified, is an example of a modified assignment or modified expectations? I hear some chats. What number are they putting in there?
They're putting in 1.
That's right, guys. You are right. Number 1 is the modified assignment. The second one is an accommodated assignment. So it's okay that the student is doing fewer problems. In this case, if I remember correctly, they're doing even problems. And that's okay because they're showing the same knowledge. But the modified assignment, where the student, I believe, was given 2 points and had to draw the slope or something along those lines, that was not the same assignment or the same grade level expectation. It's a component of the grade level expectation, and you have to have that skill before you can do the grade level expectation, but they are not doing the same work and showing the same grade level expectation, so that is modified. All right, let's go to the next one. This, I believe, is our English example.
Yes, on this,
do you mind reading it? Thank you.
On this one, students will write an essay to explain similarities and differences of techniques and literary forms represented in the literature of different cultures and eras, specifically haikus, sonnets, fables, and myths. And this is based on English Standard 10.3D.
Awesome, thank you.
Do you want me to go ahead and talk?
No, I'm back.
Okay, good. All right.
Oh, you're fat. See, I love that teamwork. I can always rely on Ellen and Debbie and everybody to help. So this next one, this is the use of a graphic organizer. And so we're looking at this English standard. So this is an English class. We can see they're writing an essay, but what they're supposed to be showing in that essay is the similarities and differences in those different literary forms. English Standard 10.3 is related to those literary forms. English Standard 10.3 is not measuring how well the student writes the essay. So while we're having the student write the essay, the main point of this assignment is demonstrating their knowledge of the sonnets, fables, myths, and haikus, the similarities and differences. So with that, which one, in this case, is modified? All right. That's right, everybody. You've got it. Number 1 is the modification of the assignment. Because in this case, the student's just identifying which one's a fable and which one's the haiku. Where in the accommodated assignment, while they're not writing the essay, and we know in English we are writing essays, purposefully, and that's a standard, but in this case they were able to show the knowledge that this standard requires using the graphic organizer. I love it, I love it, I love it. You all are on a roll. Let's go to the next one. All right, this one is a biology standard. So in this case, we're writing another essay in biology in this test. They're describing the process of photosynthesis and respiration, including the capture, storage, transformation, and flow of energy. That's a biology standard. Which one of these is considered modified? That's right. So number 2 is modified. In this case, number 1, they're getting a multiple choice instead of writing the essay. So, some people right there are like, well, that's a little easier. But in the multiple choice, they are showing the same level of knowledge that they were expected to show in the essay. And so that would be considered an accommodated assignment. All right, perfect. So there is one more example. Let's see where we are time-wise. We're looking good time-wise. So let's see, the last one is now a civics and economics standard for middle school. And this one is similar to what we've seen actually a couple times. But in this one, for the typical 8th graders, they're asking for a multi-paragraph essay because we are working on the writing longer papers across the curriculum. But we're in history class, so it's okay for a student to have the accommodation where maybe they're just writing bullet points, or maybe they're just writing one paragraph because they're showing the same level of knowledge. And in this one, I'm giving you the answer. The modified assignment is the first one. And so that's what, as school teams aren't sure if the instruction the students are receiving or if the level of knowledge they're showing is modified, we're looking at, is it meeting the grade level standard or does it not meet the standard? And we're focusing on the knowledge in the standard, not all of the other things. You know, the rubric might cover more than just the standard, the knowledge that the standard has on it. But we're looking at, did the student show the grade level knowledge that is in the standard? And so if you have any questions about that, we can come and talk to you all, talk to your teams, or come to our office hours. The next couple slides, so these slides, they were based off knowledge we shared a couple years ago, but they were new. And the content on those slides actually is on the modification and accommodation document that you all helped put together last school year before we did our shutdown. At our winter meeting, we did a modification and accommodation activity, and that's where we got some of those examples from. So thank you for your help on that and for your thinking. These next few slides, if you've been here for a few years, you have seen these actual slides before, but we thought it was important enough to show again because we know with all that's been going on since we shut down and to come back up, virtual, not virtual, concurrent, not concurrent, we know there's a lot going on, so we thought it was important enough to remind you. This question comes from a frequently asked document that's posted on the Virginia Department of Education website, and it's asking that we have a student who's just qualified as a student with disability or as a student to receive special ed services as an 11th grader. And they're wondering, can we consider the special permission locally awarded verified credit accommodation for classes they took as a 9th and 10th grader? On the next slide we see, yes, we can. So even though the student was not considered as a special ed student when they took the class, they can still be considered for the special permission locally awarded verified credit. Next slide, this was a Fairfax County scenario. Earlier on with the credit accommodations and with the SPLABC-A, there was concern that we would be overusing it, for too many students. And so we talked with schools and we talked with department chairs, about when do you have the conversations. And so in some cases, the thought was have conversations a little bit later. Give the child a chance to take the class, get remediated, let's see how they're doing. But the question is, do we need to wait until senior year to consider the special permission locally awarded verified credit? And the answer is, on the next slide, it depends. For some students and some classes, you might consider it and decide to go through the process earlier on in the student's high school career. And in other cases, you might wait. And we actually had a scenario from a couple Mays ago, 2 Mays ago, where we had a student who at the end of 9th grade had failed biology, algebra, and world history SOLs. And the parent wanted the team to consider and provide this special permission locally awarded verified credit accommodation for all 3. And the team did not go ahead and decide it for all 3. What they did is the area where the student struggled was algebra. And they, with remediation, still was not, able to pass algebra SOL or get to 375. And they knew that that is where the student truly struggled. And they didn't really see the reason behind having the student have to retake algebra year after year after year when the student has this ability, or has the ability to get the credit accommodation for that content area. They knew that the student was able to show their knowledge in class, no problem, but when it came to the SOL test and how they were able to demonstrate their knowledge on the test, that the student wasn't going to be able to do that. And so they decided to, yes, consider it for algebra. For biology, they decided to hold off on that because I forget what the 2 that we had left, biology and world history. One of them they held off on, I think it was biology, because they knew the likelihood that a student with this similar profile was more likely to pass an SOL that was coming up junior year. And so they were saying, we see with how the student shows their knowledge and how they learn, we do expect that the student's probably going to do better on the SOL, come junior year. So let's hold off on that. For world history, they decided let's give a little bit of remediation to and see how the student does. So for each content area and for each student, the decision might be a little different. And we just wanted that to be on your radar because each student is going to be different in each content area. And for the SPLABC-A, it is considered each content area separately. So you might decide yes on some, no on others, or wait or hold off on others. On the next slide, it does give you a heads up that last year the IS-690 form, that's the locally awarded verified credit form. So after you do the whole process, that's the final form that you fill out. The state did ask to add 2 questions to that, and the information of the required data that now has to be shared is on the screen. And then on the last slide, we can see that for those of you who are new to this process, there are steps that need to be followed from the IEP meeting to data that needs to be collected to turning it into central office, and then we send it to the state. So that's outlined on the Steps for School Teams handout that's on the slide as well as on the meeting guide. And then there's also a new spreadsheet. The data that your school has to collect and send to central office, the state has updated the spreadsheet. That's the same one that we use when we send it to the state. And so when you go to the link, it shows you the new information, basically the same information, just a little bit different formatting. But if you saved it on your computer in the past, please go ahead and update it and use this new spreadsheet. All righty. On the next slide, we can see that Ellen is going to tell us a little bit about ESY.
Yes, and you can see from the picture that ESY is a puzzle, and it continues to be a puzzle, but I have a little bit of information that I can share. We are looking at providing virtual and in-person options for students moving into ESY this summer. We are in the process of updating the training modules. Modules 1 and 2 we hope to have out later this week. We are updating the ESY manual for school teams and the ESY discussion guide. I did put on your meeting agenda, we have scheduled some ESY office hours, and those are on the meeting agenda. They will be February 8th, February 9th, February 16th, and February 18th, and the exact times and the link to those office hours are, again, on the meeting agenda. So at this point in time, we know that ESY will happen. We are looking at hopefully having ESY IEPs completed by April 30th, which is the date that we have had in the past, with the exception of last year. And of course, last year threw us a real curveball with COVID-19. Hopefully, school teams are collecting their data, and we'll be ready to have that discussion of whether a student requires ESY when we have more information about the exact time and dates and everything. So that's all I have for you about ESY today. So,
thank you, Ellen. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back with Ellie and her OSEI updates.
All right, we are back. I just love that timer tool that Christina has brought into this. So thank you so much, Christina. And I see that just a few of us are talking about what we think of snow days. And this morning's group, I got the impression that maybe we were a little cruel asking about this, especially after 2 days where in a typical year we might be off work. So sorry about that if it wasn't meant to be a cruel question. I just love the snow, and so, but yeah, it's not the same, I guess. So let's move forward with a more pleasant topic, right? Let's talk about some updates from the Office of Special Education Instruction. We're going to take the next few minutes, and I'm going to give you some information, pretty quickly, hopefully not too quickly. And all of these slides also have a corresponding link that can be found on your session guide. So the first one that we want to talk about is March 8th. March 8th is on the calendar as a Staff Development Day, and as some of you may know, or maybe all of you, that is a day that schools have been asked to do cultural proficiency training. Additionally, March 8th has been set aside in typical years also for central office to provide our staff development on that day. So we are working with the fact that schools are going to be doing the cultural proficiency trainings that day, And we are still going to offer trainings on the 8th. We won't be offering any all-day trainings because we know that you and your colleagues will not be available all day, but we are going to have a variety of offerings that are available. Here's just a few of the topics that we will be offering on that date, and more will be coming. They're going to be posted on the Special Ed Hub. There's a link when you go to the Special Ed Hub Professional Development that takes you to the synchronous or live training offerings. And you can see we have a variety of topics depending on who staff, what type of students staff are working with, whether it's students accessing the SOLs, students accessing the adapted curriculum. We have trainings for teachers, trainings for paraprofessionals, you name it. We're going to have such a wide variety of training offerings. And like I said, you can see some here, and they will be listed. They're not all listed, but they will be listed on the hub as that date gets a little closer. But when we think about professional development, one of the things that we have done, always had available in the past, but more so this year than ever, is the number of offerings that are available asynchronously, or what I labeled here as always available training. And on the Special Ed Hub, there are links to over 50 trainings. So more than 50 trainings are available on the hub. Once again, variety of topics for a variety of staff, depending on the population you're working with, and staff depending on if you're a paraprofessional or you're a teacher, if you're co-teaching or pushing into a setting or differentiating, et cetera, et cetera. Such a variety of topics are available on there. You can see some of the examples of the topics that are on there on this slide. And one has actually been added since last week, even when we were talking to the lead teachers, and that's the very bottom one. There's a new collection of modules regarding literacy data digging in formal assessments. And there's one module that gives an overview of the different assessments, and then there's 9 modules that go into the different assessments and the different parts of the assessments. So that is new, and you can see it has a MyPDE number on there. And that's my reminder to let you know that when you go to the hub and you click on the link for the training, many will take you right into MyPDE. And so after you complete the training, you get credit. A number of them will tell you how to link into Google Classroom. And after you do the training in Google Classroom and complete the interactive guide, then you will get credit for completing that training. So we've linked the majority of our trainings, if not all, to one of the systems that allows for you to submit your information and then get credit in MyPDE. So those trainings are always available to you, and they're in the Special Ed Hub as we speak. The last training on that slide talked about data, literacy data digging. And as we talk about the assessments, that brings up the KTEA. And this slide is talking about the scoring manual. At your school, you may have 2, 3, a number of people who can administer and score the KTEA. And in a typical year, if you have 2 people who can score the KTEA, you might just have the one scoring manual, and then when person A is done using the scoring manual, they just go across the hall and hand it to person B. Well, we know we're not in typical times. But what hasn't changed is the importance of using the scoring manual. And so this is just a reminder, please share with your colleagues who can do the assessment, the KTEA 3 assessment, that there is a copy of the scoring manual in Q Global. And it's very important that it is used as they complete the process. It helps to make sure we're sticking with the fidelity and the report has the information that's needed. So use the scoring manual, but if you can't get the actual manual, there is one in Q Global. We know that we take a lot of time in these meetings to share information with you, and we also know that sometimes the people who directly support you at your school also share information in different newsletters or emails. Well, one place where we sometimes get information that we share with you, resources, comes from the Virginia Department of Education. And the Virginia Department of Education, they have a special education instruction services section, similar like what we have here in Fairfax. and they produce a newsletter. And frequently we will take the information that they share and we will share it with you all, sort of being the middle person. Well, we realized as we were preparing for this presentation, why are we always taking information and clipping it and sharing it with you all when you all might be interested in getting it directly from the Virginia Department of Education? So here is a link to sign up to receive the Special Education Instructional Services emails from VDOE, and they come with a variety of resources. Sometimes they deal with specific topics, or many times they deal with specific topics. Sometimes they deal with multiple topics. Their links often go to either resources created by the Virginia Technical Assistance Centers, or TTAC, or they go to websites that are available to everybody out, just commercially available. But numerous resources that are very helpful. So sign up if you're interested in getting that information directly. One specifically we wanted to share with you is on the next slide, and this is both for you as well as for your general education colleagues. The International Dyslexia Association is providing free membership for teachers. It's a year-long membership. It says starter membership provides a year of resources at no cost. So we encourage you and your colleagues, both special ed and general ed, to sign up to get the resources for working with students who have dyslexia. So we wanted to share that one with you. The next resource we're going to talk about is switching gears a little bit. So rather than resources maybe for our students who are accessing the standards of learning, we're now going to talk about students who are accessing the adapted curriculum, your Cat B teachers. The adapted curriculum team has purchased licenses for the unique learning systems. And this is once again for your teachers working with students on an adapted curriculum. It is basically a repository of resources that deal with a variety of content areas. Not only does it include resources for the teacher to use during instruction, but it does also include interactive activities for the student, depending on the student's level. They can do interactive activities. And then it also includes some assessment components, so it might be able to be useful during progress monitoring. This is a resource that has been around for many years in the world of adapted curriculum. Some of you all maybe remember it from such a long time ago, the different notebooks. They have really updated the work, the information that's in here, and the variety of resources and the quality of the resources. And we're providing it to you knowing that we are finishing the year with all or part of our students being virtual. And we felt that during this virtual time, this is an important resource. However, we didn't want to just provide your Cat B colleagues this resource and just sort of, that's it, good luck, because we know you all don't have time just to explore it necessarily on your own. So the adapted curriculum team has put together a program overview that helps your teachers know about the ins and the outs of the program and how it can be used with students with disabilities. And it is available in the adapted curriculum Google Classroom. So please share that with your Cat B teachers. They're going to be really happy, most of them, when they hear about this, and they can gain access by emailing their adapted curriculum team member to receive a license. And with that, we're going to turn this over to my colleagues. We have Wendy Boehm and Gina North who are with us today, and they're going to lead us in a conversation and activity around connecting with families.
Hi, everyone. Gina and I have been tasked with coming up with a way that we can document how we are connecting with families. And during this time of virtual learning, it's more important than ever that we connect with our families, especially for those students that may be struggling, that may be not engaging as we like them to be, maybe those students that are turning on their cameras, checking in, and then ghosting for the rest of the time, or those that are just have plain non-attendance. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to take a few minutes and see how your school is documenting connecting with families, and see if there's a way that we can take all this information and create one good either source or document to keep all this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide you into breakout groups. And what we'd like to know and what we'd like you to discuss in these breakout groups is what is your school's process for documenting this? How is it working? What challenges are you having? And then how do you document like your next steps, any follow-up, and how do you make sure that that actually happens? So what we're going to do at this time is Gina's going to put you into random breakout groups. You'll have about 12 minutes, and then we will come back together. So Gina put the link in the chat that goes directly to the PowerPoint, and what we'd like you to do is whatever group you're in, go to that PowerPoint and then document your answers on that PowerPoint. Okay, any questions? All right, go ahead.
Here we go.
See you soon. Got disconnected. Can I be added? Teresa Lewis, did you see that?
All right, hang on, group. We lost quite a few people.
Did we?
Yeah.
Ooh. How many people were there?
There were over well, so like 8 people are now. 8 people have left. We had 33, I think.
Okay. Because there's 34 still here.
That includes us, though.
Oh, got it.
I think.
All right, I'm going to go into the document.
Nobody's typing yet.
Did you do less groups?
I only did 6, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, if everyone's internet is like mine, it's incredibly slow connecting.
Oh, 30. Oh.
Yeah, mine's not connecting. I don't know why.
All right, there's at least microphones on in every group, so.
And
Oh, that's
Ellie
good.
just left just to go because she froze again. So she left to go to shut herself down and try to log in, and then I froze for a few minutes. So we
Yeah,
can't.
no, and my internet has been slow and kicking me out all day. So I don't know what, I don't know.
All right, we got seven more minutes.
Is anyone typing?
Group 6 has typed in the first question, and Group 3 is working on the second. And although there are people on each, Group 2 is working on the third. A lot of people in the first slide, but nobody's doing anything yet. Group 4 and Group 5 haven't put anything in there either.
Yeah, I'm afraid to even go to a breakout group because my internet, it took me so long to log in. I'm afraid I'll go and not.
Yeah, I haven't moved because I'm afraid if I move, won't come back in.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am, Debbie. It's been really
I'm staying
frustrating.
right here. I know.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. I'm like, oh no.
And like Ellie, everybody was freezing. I mean, I could still hear it, but the screens were frozen. And it's so funny, I'm still spinning to connect with the slides. I'm going to try it again.
Oh, my slides are frozen. Uh-oh.
Yeah, there must just be an incredible amount of people online today.
Okay, my slides just froze, so I'm going to hang out here. It won't get back. There we go. Now they're unfrozen.
Okay, forgetting that stuff. Yeah, I thought we could incorporate what people are already using, and then some of the comments into one of those two templates.
Yeah, because we got a lot of good stuff from the elementary leads too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but I think it almost has to be one for elementary and one for middle school and high school.
Probably, although some of the methods might be the same.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I'm just thinking you're switching classes, multiple teachers. So if there would be a way.
Yeah, that thing. I was thinking the connecting,
Oh yeah, that would be.
That'll be more consistent.
Right. So I think there's parts of it that can definitely overlap.
The chat. Oh. We've got 3.5 minutes. I think that's going to be enough. I think it's going to be enough. I think.
One group hasn't started typing. 3 groups haven't started.
Yeah, it's funny. They're chatting because you can see the microphones, but they're not typing.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Maybe someone will share out this time.
Interesting, most people are, a lot of documentation insists.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I didn't realize like there was a mechanism to do that in SIS, because as a SPED teacher, there was so little I had access to. I'm wondering, because of for middle school and high school, you probably have to have the content areas.
Yeah, I mean, I had access to that, but I never used it. I created my own stuff.
Yeah, in elementary school, unless I had like taken the student out for the entire like language arts block, I didn't have access to anything in SIS. So there's probably a lot in there that I'm just not aware of. All right, giving them a 2-minute warning.
Well, SIS, because you had to take roll. I mean, we had to take roll.
Yeah, so yeah, you guys needed it, but I didn't. That probably would have been helpful.
Yeah, because if they were late, you had to document if they were late.
But I think Wendy and Gina, as you remind them, as they're documenting, even if it's in SIS, they always want to remember that that information can be pulled. So, you know, they always want to be careful and cautious of how it's being documented.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, that was one of the reasons. Yeah, I used to have my own code. After having one of my emails pulled and participated in a hearing, and all I said was, "Sounds good."
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's pretty funny, actually. I was on the stand for an hour over "sounds good."
Yes, I agree.
Think everyone has reconnected.
Excellent. It looked like you guys were having some great conversations in the breakout groups, and a lot of you, it seems, are using SIS to document conversations and connections with parents. And just a reminder, as we've been reminding all day, that is FOIable. Did I say that right, Debbie? And FERPable?
Yeah, FERPable.
So, yeah, so they can, parents can request that. So you just need to be cautious and aware of that. Were there any like ahas or anything that people would like to share out before we move on? That came out of the conversation? Okay, well, thank you. Oh, Megan.
Sorry, I'm going to be that jerk that like at the end is like, oh, I want to add this. Something that I feel like has been really difficult for our school, and I know that when I was having conversations with the people in my group, not every school is doing this correctly, is having a common place to document students that are coming into class but then aren't actually participating or answering in anything. So it sounds like some schools are able to use the cut code in SIS to show that students aren't participating in the class and doing the work, or that you're, you know, shouting at a camera but no one's saying anything back to you, or trying to get them in the chat. So they're still getting, but not all schools are doing that. So like, for instance, our school, we've been told not to use the cut code. So we don't really have a way to be able to track and document, unless each individual teacher in each individual class, every single class period is documenting the kids that aren't responding. And so it would be nice to have kind of a county-wide policy or code in SIS or in something to show that, hey, the student was logged in, but then did not do anything, did not comment to you, did not respond to anything you were asking them the entire time.
Right.
A ghosting code. We need a new code.
Yeah, we do. That seems to be, I think that's a general problem. I mean, at least in lots of observations I've done. Anyone else? Thank you so much, Megan. All right, well, thanks again, and I will turn it on to due process and eligibility.
Thank you, Wendy and Gina. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to turn it over to Rory and Ellen and Brad.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rory Duffield. I'm one of the senior specialists in the Office of Due Process and Eligibility. And I'm here today to just give you a quick little announcement and update regarding independent educational evaluations, or IEEs as we call them. So this summer, VDOE sent out a memo to all superintendents across the state. As you can kind of see, the information is outlined on the 2 bullet points on the slide in front of you. Essentially what that was is it provided some clarification to school divisions about IEE requests by the parent. So specifically what happened or transpired in that memo is that after the federal government provided some clarification for Virginia Department of Education, was that essentially parents can now request an IEE in an area that was not previously assessed. So for example, if a student went through a reevaluation and the school team did an updated psychological and educational, and then all of a sudden the parent says, I disagree with the evaluations, I want a new psych and an educational, but I also want a speech and language. Well, in the past, we would say no because we did not have a chance to do that speech and language on our terms, but we now have received information that that is no longer required. So parents can now ask for evaluations that were not initially done. So what does that mean? If we move on to the next slide, what that essentially means is 2 different things. One is that parents could be providing us, the school teams, with some reports that we do not have an FCPS equivalent, and that's okay. Certainly it'd be great if we did have one and we don't have to do an equivalent, but and what that means by having these new reports is that we may also need to consider some new areas of eligibility. So as the example I gave you, because there was never any speech and language concerns, but the parent got a private speech and language done through the IEE request, that the committee may have to come back and consider that area of eligibility when there was never any concerns in the first place. So that's essentially what it means, and we just want to make you all aware of that change, because certainly that's going to create some scenarios or situations where we have some new information that we're not familiar with, and we just need to be prepared for that. So any questions from the peanut gallery, as I'll call you guys? All right, if there are no questions, then I believe Ellen Glazier is up next with Recovery Services.
Ellen, do you have your mic on? Okay. Brad,
Looks like
are
she's
you
doing
able
it back
to
in the
go?
room. Yeah, I can go again.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to have Brad go next, and then Ellen will come back in.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Bartasevich. I am a Crisis Prevention and Policy Specialist with DP&E. So I just wanted to kind of go over, this is kind of the overview of the FCPS restraint and seclusion policy that went into effect on January 1st, 2021. This FCPS policy, which was voted on and approved by our school board, meets the VDOE, Virginia Department of Education's policy requirements, and in some areas we in addition to meeting, we also exceed in some areas, which I'll kind of highlight some of those. Also wanted to take time to mention that seclusion will only be permissible at the Burke School, Key Center, and Kilmer Center. So just some training information. So the first one is the de-escalation level 1 training, which is understanding the regulation govern the use of restraint or seclusion. At this point, everyone in this room should probably have already taken this training. It was assigned through my PDE. However, if it is not yet, you can go to your My PDE, or you can even search by typing in de-escalation level 1, where the full understanding the regulations, it should come up for you. And those are video modules. The next one is de-escalation level 2, which is the advanced training. This is in Fairfax County. We have MANT and professional crisis management. MANT comes, your contact person for MANT would be the Behavior Intervention Services. And for professional crisis management, and the trainers are the applied behavior analysis coaches from the ABA department. So, and de-escalation level 2 is for at least one administrator per building. And in addition, it's for any assigned staff that works with a student whose IEP or Section 5014 determines that the student is likely to be physically restrained or secluded, then you would want to make sure that you receive that advanced training. Chances are you've already been the ABA and Behavior Intervention Services team and has been working overtime to meet the needs and get all the staff trained. But for some reason, if you haven't been contacted yet, you would want to contact your BIT or ABA coach in your building and then give you more information. Lastly, there's going to be a policy overview, which again, I'm giving the overview of the overview, but this will be required for staff that receive that de-escalation level 2 training, which will be an overview including all the provisions, parent notification, about the different debriefs and the policy requirements. Administrators, last week we did principals receive this policy overview. This week we're doing assistant principals. We did it yesterday and we're doing it again tomorrow. But for teachers who will be assigned this training, it will be an asynchronous training opportunity, which will be coming soon. One of the first things I really wanted to highlight is what is the definition of seclusion. And this might sound like it's a little bit different, just to know that the definition of seclusion has not changed. Just in Fairfax County Public Schools, our understanding of it, we got a little clarification from the VDOE, so I wanted to read that seclusion is defined as the voluntary confinement of a student alone in a room from which the student is physically prevented from leaving, provided that no such room or space is locked. So for example, if you're in a situation where you're supporting a student that goes into crisis, and say when the student goes into crisis, you have to do a room evacuation where all the other students are evacuated from the room. However, you as the teacher or the IA are still in the room supporting that supporting that student, going through that crisis cycle, and then say that student tries to leave that room and you block and redirect them and you're trying to get them back to their seat or into an area. Since you're in the room with the student's not alone, so that would not be seclusion. And in the past, you might have filled that out as seclusion because the student was attempting to leave the room and you blocked them. But again, I can't emphasize enough that it's only alone in the room. Next slide, please. Some highlights of the policy. So in the initial development and review and revisions of the student's IEP or Section 504 plan, the student's IEP or 504 team shall consider for any student who displays behaviors that are likely to result in the use of physical restraint or seclusion. If you guys determine that, you want to make sure that you have an FBA, a new or revised behavior intervention plan, new or revised IEP goals. There might be some social emotional goals that you want to make sure the student has, any additional evaluations or reevaluations. Or if it's a gen ed student without an IEP, you might want to think about as a team considering to local screening. So within 10 school days following the first school day in a single year in which an incident of physical restraint or seclusion occurs, the student's IEP or 504 team shall consider, among other things, and meet to have either, again, a new FBA, possibly a new revised behavior intervention plan, new revised IEP goals, and any other additional evaluations or reevaluations for that student. And again, and this is one of those areas in which our FCPS policy exceeds the VDOE guidelines, where the VDOE guidelines, and in your modules you would see that it's after the second instance. Here in FCPS, after the first instance of restraint or seclusion, you need to have within 10 days that FBA IEP, that meeting. So as soon as practical, but no later than the day of the incident. So the student is physically restrained today. By the end of today, you're going to make sure that the staff member involved reported that incident and use of any related first aid to the school principal or designee. The school principal or designee or other school personnel shall contact the parent regarding the incident and any related first aid. The employee involved in the incident or designated by the administration will fill out our use of physical restraint or seclusion documentation form, which we're going to go over that in a minute, as well as provide the principal or designee the written incident report and making sure that you're sending home that copy of the incident report the day of the incident. As soon as practical, but no later than 2 days after the incident, that the school team, led by the principal or designee, will have to have a staff debrief. And during the staff debrief, what's going to happen is you're going to go over the incident as a team, kind of talking about, and when we get in deeper in the policy overview, there's going to be, in order for restraint or seclusion to occur, there's only 5 reasons in which it would occur. So the first part of that team would making sure that was the restraint or seclusion warranted, and more importantly, how to prevent and reduce the future need of physical restraint or seclusion in the future. So as a team, what can we be doing as that student starts to escalate? What are some of those trigger type behaviors that we would want to intervene? What kind of staff training do we might have to provide to help support our school teams? That could be working with central office as we can help support you with that. But the whole point of this is to really make sure that we are doing what we can so it doesn't happen again in the future. Okay, so as soon as practical, but no later than 2 school days of the incident, you're going to have a student debrief. And this is going to be dependent, as appropriate, depending on the student's age and developmental level. The principal or designee shall review the incident with the student to discuss, and again, it's going to be the principal or designee, so it might be the staff that works with that student in the classroom, the details of the incident in an effort to assist the student and school personnel in identifying patterns of behaviors, triggers, or antecedents. So the antecedent, what happens before the behavior. Alternative positive behaviors or coping skills that might need to be happen. What was the impact in the restraint or seclusion on the student, making sure that they are okay, because it could be a very traumatic experience to be physically restrained or secluded. So we're going to make sure that that student's okay, and we're doing everything we can to support them. And then here's another one. This student conference is another one of those areas in which our FCPS policy exceeds the VDOE policy of. So in addition to that student debrief, it's also going to be a student conference. And what the student conference is a conference with a trusted school personnel. This conference the student should be able to choose that trusted adult. However, if that's not possible due to age or developmental level, school staff may choose among team members and or consult with the parent guardian regarding the most suitable staff person in the building for that conference. For that conference, we want to make sure that the staff who conferences with the student, you're consulting with your clinical staff and other support staff, which might be your behavior intervention teacher, ABA, coach, as resources as needed. And then with the conference, the student actually has the can decide to decline that conference. If they do, we are going to honor that. Following an incident, restraint, or seclusion, so we want to have the school staff will provide the student, parent, guardian with resources and offer them an opportunity to participate in that follow-up conference. That's going to be led by your administrative team in your building, the clinical team in your building, staff. Also, back to as we were talking about, the physical restraint seclusion can be traumatic for our students, but it could also be for the staff. So making sure that staff know that the employee assistance program is available if needed. Now we're going to take a minute and dive a little bit deeper into the use of the new form. This form, you can get this from, it's on the DP&E intranet page. It's in the electronic forms cabinet. You have a direct link on your guide from today. I highly recommend opening it, direct link using Internet Explorer. If you open it up in Google, it might not open correctly, or it might actually open in the old form. So just open it in Internet Explorer so you have no problem, and save it to your desktop. So with this documentation, the first thing you're going to do, in the past, we had one form for physical restraint and one for seclusion. Since seclusion is only Burke Key and Kilmer Center, and with our better understanding of the definition of seclusion, we've decided it's going to be on one form. So the first thing you would do is you would either indicate physical restraint or seclusion, followed by the student's name, date of birth, gender, grade, ethnicity, student ID, the school. You're going to indicate, was it a gen ed student or a student with possibly an IEP or 504 plan? If it is a student with an IEP, we're going to want to know their primary disability, and does that student have a behavior intervention plan? That's going to be really helpful information as we are in your school building, supporting that student, looking at the data to notice trends, but then also centrally, a central office, us supporting, kind of knowing what's the data it's telling us. Then you're going to see there's a date of the incident, which it has, in this example, a begin time of 10 o'clock and end time of 10:10, but the whole total duration of that physical restraint or seclusion was only 3 minutes. So then there's another box below in which you're going to be able to indicate, so for each instance, so in this example from 10 o'clock to 10:01 it was 1 minute, 10:03 to 10:04 it was 1 minute, and from 10:09 to 10:10 it was 1 minute. And again, that's going to give us really good data to look at the duration and intensity of behaviors and seeing how long they last. And this is also going to help so you don't have to fill out the same form multiple times if all of the behaviors occur in a window. Then going into the documentation, you're going to have to document and say who are the staff members that are performing the physical restraint or seclusion. So we have two different examples here because, as we stated a little bit ago, our crisis management trainings that we offer in Fairfax are either going to be MANT or professional crisis management. So in the first example, Jane Doe is a teacher. You're going to indicate that yes, she was trained in MANT, and what did she implement? One person side body hug. And that language comes directly right from MANT. And where you can see the PCM example, there was two staff members. Yes, they were both trained, and they both implemented a two-person standing vertical immobilization. And again, that comes right from the PCM language. In a minute, we're going to go a little bit further down in the form. We're going to have to go back to explaining what this physical restraint or seclusion looked like. And this is going to be very helpful. It's almost like our sentence starter to kind of start that sentence. All right, then we're going to indicate, we're going to identify the least restrictive interventions and use prior to that physical restraint or seclusion. So what happened right before the emergency intervention? Did you provide verbal and visual redirections? Did you remind her of the reinforcement system? Did you offer choices? So for any of the things that you did right before it, you're going to indicate and check as many of those boxes as appropriate. If the least restrictive intervention is not listed there, you're going to check other and then describe what that is. And lastly, if there was no previous least restrictive intervention used, you would select that box and then describe why not. Okay, number 2 is when we're going to select the condition that triggered the use of physical restraint or seclusion. And that was kind of what I just briefly touched upon a little bit ago, where you're going to indicate, so to determine if a physical restraint, why was it? So was it because you were preventing a student from inflicting serious physical harm or injury, defending self or others from serious physical harm? For the policy overview training, you'll go into a deeper look at this and then go through some scenarios, because it's going to help support making sure that, again, we're only ever implementing a physical restraint or seclusion if it meets one of these 5 criteria. Lastly, down at the bottom, it says provide a detailed description of the student behavior. So we want to be as objective as possible and describe what it looked like. So for example, in some I usually say, so if you took a picture of aggression, what did it look like? Aggression will be defined as any instance or attempt when the student with a closed hand punched staff 8 times on the right arm. So it's very descriptive and it's very clear what that aggression looks like, because again, that's going to help you in your team, in your building, and with central office collaborating, supporting, working with everyone to help support what does that challenging behavior really look like. Number 3, you're going to provide a detailed description of the incident, including the antecedent, the resolution, and the process of return to the student to their educational setting. Similar to what we were just talking about, we really want to make sure that when we're providing this detailed description, it's very objective and it's highlighting, what happened right before the behavior, what was the resolution, and how did that student get back into the learning environment. So you want to be really clear with that, because it's going to, again, help support during that staff debrief, as well as additional supports and staffing for us to really dive deeper to kind of get to almost like the function or the root of why the behavior happened. So then we can figure out, how can we be more proactive? The best intervention is always going to be prevention. So what can we do moving forward? Number 4, you're going to provide a detailed description of that physical restraint or seclusion and method used. So kind of like that when I just described that sentence starter, you're going to describe out exactly what did that physical restraint or that seclusion look like, using that either PCM or MANT language to describe exactly what happened. Then number 5 is, did anyone sustain any injury? If so, you're going to indicate yes, describe what that looked like, or no. Moving right along to our form. So this is the last part. So number 6, 7, and 8, those are those staff debrief, student debrief, and student conference. And as you're going to see right under each section, it says completed or in progress, because the timeline for this written documentation needs to be sent home the day of the incident. Now, in a best case scenario, you're going to have that staff debrief and those student debriefs the day of the incident. But what happens if that behavior happens at 3 o'clock as the students are going on the bus? You might not have time to do it. So you would either indicate that, yes, it was completed on the first day, or no, it's going to be in progress. And if you indicate in progress, you have 2 days to complete. Then you'll see it says method of debrief. And again, that comes right from the VDOE that we have to describe what that method is. But if you think about what a staff debrief looks like, it's really a team meeting. Maybe you possibly do it virtually, so maybe a virtual team meeting. But the important thing is that you're just documenting that the meeting occurred and what was that method. For number 7 and 8, that's student debrief and student conference. Now, those might be, everything that we do, we want to make sure that we are individualizing it based on what that student needs. So those debriefs, what accommodations and modifications might need to be included? Do we need visuals? Is it even appropriate? But all of those are, and there might be some really tough questions. Don't feel like you're alone with this in your school building. Like I said, don't hesitate to reach out to your procedural support, to your behavior intervention teacher, to your ABA coach, the clinical team in your building, or the additional central office clinical teams to kind of help what that might look like for each student. Now, and also that student debriefing conference, that might occur at the same time. But for some students, it might be better to do it in separate meetings. It really depends on the situation. Then you're going to see there's a notification of the incident. So when the school or program administrator was notified, the day of the incident, you have to contact the parent. So you're going to indicate, was it a phone call, a text message, an email, in person, or there's that box other, because what if it was a phone call but they didn't answer and you left a voicemail? So you can be very descriptive of what that communication looked like. For the copy of the incident documentation emailed, this is something new that we're doing. Previously, what you would do is, if an instance of restraint or seclusion occurred, you would either pony it or email it to Mike Bloom, from OSCI, the director, or to Natasha Anthony. So for now, it's going to be this crisis prevention email, and it's kind of like that. You dial one phone number, all our numbers ring. You're making sure that that form goes to the appropriate central office support. So is it the behavior intervention teacher, the ABA coach, to your PSL, to your psychologist, social worker, etc. The point is, so we're trying to get you support in the building as soon as possible. So with this new email address, it's going to go to all the right people at the same time. And it's also and don't forget, in addition to sending that, you also have to document each instance of restraint or seclusion in SIS. And lastly, when was the copy of the incident documentation sent to the parent or guardian? And I think that's it. Any questions for in regards to restraint and seclusion? It also, you can find on the DP&E intranet page, there are office hours that are optional on Mondays from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock that you can attend. If that doesn't work, like I said, you can get to that link from the DP&E intranet page. It's listed on your handout from today. And again, if that time doesn't work, please don't hesitate to reach out, because the more we can be proactive in support, the better we can help support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yay! So I'm going to talk a little bit about recovery services. Just a few reminders. We've heard from a couple parent organizations and seen in some C-STARS reports, and they're just that parent organizations have brought up some concerns that that they feel like parents are having to bring up recovery services. So just kind of a little bit of a reminder that it is our responsibility to provide recovery services. Recovery services are not compensatory services. Nobody's done anything wrong. So when a school team is considering compensatory services, it's just an important perspective for everyone to come to around the agreement that nothing is done wrong. This has just been a situation, and recovery services is the state of Virginia and FCPS's way to help out the child. So recovery services are also not school intervention. A lot of schools are working on intervention plans where they're getting kids together for specific groups, for specific lessons. These are not recovery services unless they are documented on the IEP and they're specifically for the child to make progress in their goals or accessing their specialized curriculum. So it's just a little bit of a difference between compensatory intervention and recovery. The other reminder I'm going to give is that at DP&E, we are also available to help with KTA testing and testers. We do have people who are willing to test before, after school, and on weekends to help you all out with your caseloads. So if you have cases in which that would work for, you can access the DP&E intranet page, and under the Return to School heading, there's all the information about requesting KTA testers and also requesting recovery teachers. So we do have a bank of recovery teachers that if you don't have somebody in your school who would like to provide a student recovery services, we do have a bank of teachers that are available to do that before, after school, and on weekends. Recovery services don't have to happen before, after school, and on weekends, however. They are just, in order for a teacher to be compensated extra, that is when they would happen. But you are welcome to provide recovery services. All schools are welcome to provide recovery services during the days if they wish. So another few recovery services reminders, just to report when you are doing recovery service teaching or testing before, after school, or on weekends to DP&E. I'm keeping track of all of that so I can make sure that all people who do that work get paid correctly. And another reminder is the recovery services go on the grid with an R after them. So we know V means virtual and F means face-to-face. R means recovery. And sometimes teams are unintentionally choosing like LDR services on accident. And that has come up a couple times in C-STARS reports, and I've sent a couple emails. It's not a huge deal. I know it's just a clerical error, but a lot of you guys out there are being principals designees. So if you just kind of key into that when you're on the services grid, that will help people to not have to do IEP addendums to fix those kinds of clerical errors. In terms of recovery services on IEPs, we know that IEPs, this is a data-driven decision, and we've talked a lot in previous office hours about rate of acquisition and kind of gone into depth, but also lots of other data can be used. You know, the data from the children's reading programs, from the iReady, from all of the different data points that you have access to, all of those data points can be used, and you can make a decision with looking at those data points. You don't necessarily need to every time calculate the rate of acquisition. And then upon parental consent for recovery services, if they're going to happen before or after school or on weekends, or you need a recovery teacher from my bank of recovery teachers, you would just reach out to me and I will help you throughout the whole process and point you in the right direction. Everything is very detailed on the intranet page under the Return to School for DP&E. You'll find all of the resources that you need there, but I'm also available. Additionally, DP&E specialists are going to be reaching out for pyramid meetings and organizing that. If you haven't already heard, they're organizing it with PSLs, and they're going to do more in-depth recovery presentation and reminders, and you'll have a chance to ask questions there. And of course, you're welcome to ask questions today and here as well.
Ellen, can I just jump in for a sec? I just wanted to add that PSLs are also going to be working with the school teams to use their CTs or the department meetings to identify students who may, to go through their caseloads, I should say first. So you could go through your caseloads, go through all their students, and then really talk through the students to identify a list of students that they believe possibly could require recovery services, and then share that information with your administrative team and your PSLs. We've been meeting with parent groups, SEPTA and the ACSD, who parents have had a lot of concerns about, or voiced concerns about, that they do believe that not all parents know to reach out, and that all parents may not reach out, and what is school teams doing to propose recovery services and to elicit those conversations. And we have reassured them that in all our documentation, our guidance documents, it clearly states that school teams will reach out when they believe there's a need for recovery services. Parents have that document, and we've been having a lot of conversations. In some cases, school teams and parents have agreed to postpone the conversations because we're still in virtual instruction, and we haven't, groups that were in are now back in virtual, and they're hoping that they'll be back in soon. And I also this morning mentioned that during the SEPTA meeting on February 16th from 7 to 8, the VDOE is sending one of their representatives to come and speak about recovery services to the SEPTA group, the parent group, and he will be, Hank Billward will be using the VDOE document that they put together. I believe we sent that out in August, and that's the information that we use, and we kind of pare down our information to provide you a guidance document. So he'll be using that when he does that presentation that evening. I believe it's from 7 to 8 that evening. So just if you get a lot of questions from parents, or just as they're doing presentations, myself, Dawn, and Jane Strong have been involved in evening meetings where we've done presentations on recovery. So you may see more and more parents asking questions or calling or just inquiring about it. Ellen, this morning there was a question about if a teacher were doing holding recovery services in the afternoon, and she had a group of students, and she had students with multiple needs, and she felt that there was a need to have an instructional assistant also support. How would that, what do they do? And I had broached that question to Ellen. Ellen, were you able to find out any information on that, or we're still checking?
We are still checking on that one, Debbie.
Okay, so in case that does come up, because we've discussed it with groups, and we've said you don't have to do one-on-one. It could be groups. As you have more students with, a variety of needs, you may, that may come up, that we may need additional support for the teacher as she's supporting groups. Let us know, and we will try to figure out that question. But that's the first time we got that question so far, so I thought I'd bring it up in this group. Are there any other questions on recovery? We're going to break you out in groups, so we're going to stay in the main room, and we will break you out into groups. So if you want to, if your PSL is here and you want to go into one of your region groups, the breakout rooms in region 1, 2, 3, and 5 will be the region groups. So if you're region 1, you would go to region breakout room 1. If you want to be by yourself, to go through documents and just have quiet time, you would go to the breakout room 6. And the main room is breakout room 7, which is a question and answer room, or if you have any comments. And I'm going to put on check to switch so that you can go in between rooms if you want to go to your region room first and then come back. So I will start that. Right. So we're going to stay in the main room, the presenters that are here, in case you have any questions. As I said, this session has been recorded in case you would like to share it or go over it at the end of with your teams, and I will post it on the Special Ed Hub once it becomes available, and usually takes just about an hour or two, and then I will send it to Ellie to post. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat, raise your hand, and we'll take any of your.
Debbie?
Yes.
I just kind of had a thought about that IA thing, but if there's other questions, we should take those.
No, that's okay. You can, there's now.
Okay. So with IAs, if they work past their hours, they have to get time and a half. I think, I'm running it by Dawn, but I almost think that we'd prefer to break them up into 2 groups and pay 2 teachers. I just don't think there's a way to use IAs after because
Yeah, and I don't know either. That's why I said we would have to check, but it was a good question because I don't think it's ever come up before, but it's something that it's probably going to come up as we have students with different needs who may need, bathroom. The person had said they have 2 students that'll be in the group who may need help with bathroom needs or anything with snacks, and maybe too much for the teacher on her own. So, I think there's going to be circumstances out there.
Likewise, if there's more than 2 students, if there's multiple in a group for recovery services, and IA certainly could be helping that teacher who's providing the services to the group.
But I did have concerns as to whether or not we can actually, what would we do? How do IAs get paid after if they're covering? Is that possible?
And I think that's a very sticky point in the county. I remember my time as department chair, and our principal always wanted us not keeping IAs after hours at all.
That's exactly the way it was for us too. If they ever came to anything after school, it was like they would come home early on another day that week.
Yeah, and that was my understanding as well, but we might as well check into it, because if it does come up, we may need to have more than one staff member or teacher in the room then, or split them.
Ellen, can't they be paid just like anybody else if they're working outside of their contract hours? I think that's more the issue, is that they don't get compensated if they work outside their contract hours, right?
I think it's that they have to have time and a half.
Oh, okay.
And I think time and a half might put them at, I don't know what that would put them at.
But it's probably possible. I just think it's a whole nother thing with HR.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That's too bad because, you know, when the person asked the question this morning, I was like, well, yeah, it's just like during ESY, we have IAs and PHAs, you know, for that exact reason what that individual was describing is students have toileting issues or feeding issues. It's really tough to be working with them and try to feed them as well as.
I actually put it on my list of things for us to talk about at our Wednesday meetings because I think that's